Hey there, this is Alec Soth, and I'm back in my studio in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's been like half a year since I've done this, and I'm feeling pretty rusty. Earlier this week, I gave a online lecture, and so I set up my whole light table video camera thing here, and thought I would try to see if I could do one of these videos again. This isn't wildly planned out or anything. I just picked a couple of recent books that have shown up at the studio here that speak to my ongoing interest in the relationship between words and pictures. So I thought I would start by talking about this book by Tim Davis. It's really a beautifully produced small hardcover book by Aperture. And let's see if I can remember all my little shortcuts here. So here it is. And I'm really not going to talk about the whole book. But I just wanted to point out that there is plenty of writing in it. It starts with an essay by Tim Davis himself, and there are additional essays by him as you go along. And Tim is a very flamboyant and colorful writer. As colorful as his photographs. What I wanted to talk about is one sequence of pictures and its relationship to the text in the book. So this small little sequence starts here. These two men wrestling. Some sort of dancer or actress rehearsing, it looks like. Someone reading a script. I should mention these are all LA-based photographs. Here's this interesting transition, which kind of speaks to this kind of stuttering time sequence that I talked about in another video. Okay, and the sequence ends with this picture of a body in the trunk of a car. I'll just zoom in for you on that. And it looks like that. Okay, and so then there's a whole bunch of pictures, and we eventually get to this essay called "Bar Fight is Artist Statement." And in this essay, first of all, Tim Davis talks about just walking around in the LA landscape and just seeing things, witnessing things. And he says this, there's one line here. Let me find it. A mixed martial arts gym, empty except for two straight, I asked them, salesmen, writhing on the mats in the mating ritual of bush pythons. So that line goes back to that first photograph in the sequence we saw of the two men wrestling. And so he gives us this little information, this little glimpse into it. And you imagine Tim Davis encountering them and asking them if they were straight or not. And then, so the book carries on, more pictures, more pictures, more pictures. And we get to the final essay, which is called "The Corpse of Content." And this essay if it wouldn't be so awkward, I would read the entire thing. But it's hysterically funny, and it says so much about photography. I will just read the beginning here. I'm old enough to admit that I'm pretty good at photography. I'm like good at it. I know how to wrestle or squeeze significance out of almost any situation. It is one of my few consistent beliefs that there is an infinite amount of significance in the universe, an almost bottomless well of telltale to draw from. I know how to pull back into a wide embrace and allow the camera, which doesn't care where it is positioned, to pitch up its admiration for the world's surfaces by stretching the tension between described and describer. I know how to lie down on the floor and look under a chair. I don't mind asking someone to move over a little or to pretend they've swallowed a cherry pit. So, he's humorously talking about his process and his kind of confidence as a photographer. But then he goes on to say, but there are bad days where it's hard to know whether to pull the car over here or to keep driving. There are days when nothing pops, when the world feels drained of contrast or saturation or certainty. There are days when I'm unsure what I'm looking for. And he talks about how he wishes he had a style like Friedlander where he could just photograph anything, sort of twist the subject into something, but he needs something else. And he says, unlike Friedlander, the rest of us have to have something to say. We need content, and it's not always forthcoming. On these days, I fantasize about dead bodies. I've had long reveries walking down a highway in Tennessee or next to some unsparing spillway in northern New Jersey about what would happen if I found a human corpse. Would I call the police? Would I photograph it first? What if the light was wrong? Would I wait to call the police? Would I try to make a dramatic image? Or simply stand back and let the dead body emanate in its own unacceptability? It's happened enough times that I gave the phenomenon a name, the corpse of content. It stands for the photographer's yearning for content so potent, it's taboo. And then he tells a couple sort of related stories. So one of going to an opera and witnessing a singer die on stage, and then another example of collaborating with an artist in Bulgaria and encountering a dead body and actually moving the body for a better picture, which is a story that I want to hear more about someday. And then we go back to LA, the making of this book, and he talks about having one of those days where it's just beautiful out, and he's so excited to go on this aimless walk. And he says this, everything looks good, but are there pictures here? You keep seeing things, interesting things. A man washing a phalanx of yellow-handled shopping carts, the spray jetting off them, scattering rainbows around. The sugar rush fills you with boldness, and you scamper down an embankment to the supermarket parking lot. You nod at the workmen, and they nod back. You're in, right here, right now, in front of something beautiful and resonant. You finally managed to cross the dance floor to talk to the high school crush, and he's all ears. You have something to say, but do you know how to say it? You can't seem to find an obvious place to put the frame. You raise the camera up, but the buildings and cars in the background feel illegible. You don't get the connection between the radiant ritual you're observing and the stucco Tetris just beyond. You get down on your knees to frame out the city, but then you're oversimplifying, and it feels cheap. Overcomplicated or oversimplified. Too much sky or too much street. These dualisms are warning signs that you're not seeing the picture. You're seeing a thing and trying to build a picture around it. That's when you give up. So this experience that he describes is one that I've had a million times, which is you see something amazing, you approach it, you try to take the picture and you can't find the picture. And you're getting down on your knees and you're moving in the backside and it's not appearing. And so he talks about just giving up after half an hour. And then he gets a call from his wife who has an art studio in a church. And she's like, you got to get over here right away. And he says, I raced up flights of stairs to find my wife, eyes wild, pointing out the window. From its heavy stone sills, you could see down into what is usually an abandoned alley. But no place in Los Angeles remains no place for long. Below, a bloodied young man lay motionless in the trunk of the car. A woman stood over him, holding the hatch door open. Even amid a thicket of film equipment, all I could see was the impossibility of death. To this day, when people look at this picture, they often don't notice the camera and sandbags and production assistant. A corpse rings a bell, and it takes a minute for its sound waves to decay. But once I realized I was looking at a film production, I saw the entire picture immediately. Its frame and focus were inevitable. And what I love about this is that this incredible picture, which, really stays with you as you look through the book, we get to experience it in a different way in the back of the book through text. And for me, that story behind the picture does not ruin the picture. I had my first encounter with it. If that text had been here, for example, that probably would have ruined the picture. It would have been competing with the text. But since that text is embedded in a longer essay, it's almost like we discover it again and get to revisit this photograph in a new way. And for me, that's a really successful example of using text and image. So Tim Davis's book it's small and compact. It has a lot of pictures and a good amount of text, but there's a breeziness to it. It feels like a casual walk through Los Angeles. A very different experience is a book that I recently received. It's actually 3 books in one, and it's called Whatever You Say, Say Nothing. It's gigantic. The box looks like this. The 2 of the individual volumes look like this. And then there's a third book of text that's like this. And it's actually in this third book, which is called Annals of the North, where it says, Whatever You Say, Say Nothing contains 1,000 pages and 70 words. It speaks in a purely visual language, in an invented grammar. The many, many words in the annals are meant to open up that language and to provide the reader with a set of tools for exploring it. So I thought I would just give you a little glimpse into how that functions. So let me turn to the book here. And so, again, this is just volume 1. And I'm just going to show you the introduction to the book and how it works. So it starts with this kind of poetic passage that's almost like the title sequence in a film, and just sort of setting the stage, setting the mood for what's about to happen. This book is all about the Troubles in Northern Ireland, but we start with us, just landscapes, not much people, just this feeling for the country that we're going into. Mostly deserted, a couple figures here and there. And then we have the actual title, Whatever You Say, Say Nothing. And importantly, Perez calls this a documentary fiction, which is very much like Gilles Perez. He never wants you to think this is the truth, despite the fact that it's 1,000 pages and there's I don't know how many pages of text. What he's aiming for is not truth, but maybe something more like what Werner Herzog called ecstatic truth. Anyway, the book then starts with the first day. And as you go through the book, it's broken up into chapters, and they're all called days of different sorts. And so the first day takes you in, and I'm just going to show you this sequence. And I guess what I want to emphasize is just how damn good the pictures are. When I looked at this book for the first time, I thought, there's no way these are all going to be good pictures. It's impossible. And there's no way it's going to hold up for 1,000 pages. But it does. And there are different movements and different feelings, but there's just consistently unbelievable photographs. Don't know how well you can see here, but this bride viewed out a car window, dog and man on a snowy day between two walls. And Gilles Perez does something always with the spreads. Sometimes the pictures are merged together in a panoramic, using a panoramic camera, or I think he sometimes stitches them together. But other times, they're two separate images, but they almost can be read as one image. This first sequence has lots of children. This is just such a thrilling pair, and they're enhanced by each other. The shifts in mood, inside to outside, dark to light. A feeling of violence everywhere, and then explicit violence. Okay, so that's just the first day of many. Incredible. So that's in volume 1. I want to show you a sequence that confused me a little bit in volume 2, and how it's affected by the text in Volume 3. So this is called Days of Shoot to Kill. And, at this point I had looked at, 600 photographs and was still on the edge of my seat. And I got here. Okay, still an incredible pair of photographs. Unbelievable picture. And sometimes when there's a photograph so powerful, it's best to have it paired with something static. And this is what threw me a little bit. Also, just an incredible picture, a strange kind of blurriness to it. And then this photograph. And I was like, that is not up to par with the other pictures. It's kind of soft. It's not clear. Okay, there's a feeling of the casket being moved, but why is this here? It actually stood out for me going through. And then I carried through the rest of the chapter with great pictures and great pictures. Occasionally there are these sort of motion sequences. So it's this feeling of this moving of the casket from one place to the next, and of a funeral, etc. There's an example of one of those panoramas. That's amazing. Unbelievable photograph. So we're back to great pictures. But I'm pointing this out just to say that out of all these photographs, one of them threw me out of whack. And so then I finished the book, devastated by its greatness. And I started reading Annals of the North. And so far back here, so Annals of the North is broken up into different chapters as well. And some of them have denser text and some of them are looser. And this particular section has a story which is about that photograph that I pointed out in the previous section. And it's much like the Tim Davis essay, it talks about the process of the making of the picture and kind of changes the way we look at the picture. So I'm going to just read this. 1985 was a gruesome year, a shoot-to-kill year, a year when the state's forces abandoned the exhaustingly blunt instruments of the law for the short, sharp crack of bullets. One day during that brutal summer, word arrived in Derry about 3 volunteers who had been executed the night before in a field outside Strabane. They'd been moving a cache of arms when the army surprised them. They immediately surrendered, and then they were killed. The photographer got in his car. By the time he arrived, Strabane, the most bombed-out town in Europe, with its highest unemployment rate, glowered in the late afternoon murk. He stopped on a tricolored street and asked for the volunteer's address. A boy pointed to him to an estate just outside the town. He passed by the field on his way. 3 white crosses already stood there, marking the spot where the men had died. A small crowd bunched around them, silent, waiting. Arriving at the house of one of the volunteers, they had been a pair of brothers and a friend. The photographer found Martin McGinnis on the curb. They didn't know each other well, maybe because McGinnis was a dairyman and the photographer spent more time in Belfast, maybe because each had other things to focus on. But McGinnis greeted him politely, and when the photographer asked if he could enter the house, he was led inside with no words wasted. Night was falling. Children sat packed on a sofa in the good room, watching television. The photographer stood in the kitchen and smoked a woodbine before heading upstairs, where the dead man lay in his coffin, covered in mass cards, a living volunteer in a balaclava on either side of him, standing guard. Neighbors bustled through and touched the corpse's hands, leading down to whisper farewells in his cold, bandaged ears. When the photographer returned to the kitchen, the air had changed. McGinnis had become agitated and was pacing the room. He had realized from the helicopters whirling overhead that the army was closing in, determined to prevent a Republican funeral with its traditional volley over the casket. Suddenly he bounded upstairs and then, just as quickly, came flying back down, now accompanied by 3 men and the casket. Somehow they navigated the stairway, even though it was so narrow a man on his own could barely fit. And before anyone realized what was happening, they had the coffin out the door and into the garden. The photographer only had time to shoot one picture out the kitchen window as they left. So there's that picture and the explanation of why it's imperfect. He just had this one opportunity, but it was such an important moment. It was such an important moment in his story that he felt the need to include it in the book. And the story goes on. In the dark garden, McGinnis reigned amidst the chaos, organizing people around the coffin. A paper bag appeared and he pulled out 4 guns, which he handed to 4 masked volunteers, 2 on either side of the casket. "Shoot," he yelled, and they shot. While this was happening, the photographer had to wrestle with his own chaos, the chaos of representation. The sky had grown black, and his flash was refusing to sync to his camera or to trigger. As McGinnis improvised the funeral, the photographer decided to improvise as well. He put the camera on bulb, opening the shutter, and then, when McGinnis yelled "shoot," he popped his flash. The moment the report ceased, he closed the shutter. He had made his Leica shoot the picture in reverse. So that explains this ghostly effect in this photograph. So what I think is amazing about that is the way, again, the text separated from the photographs changes the way we look at the photographs and gives them a kind of new sort of intensity without ruining the pictures. Again, it's a matter of placement. By putting it in this separate book, one has to find it and discover it, and somehow that leaves space for me as the viewer to not feel like meaning, like the Tim Davis's The Corpse of Content, like that corpse being shoved at me. I'm allowed to find it, essentially, much like the photographer found their subject. And I just think these are 2 striking examples of text and image. They're also really great books, so different. And, whatever you say nothing. Again, it's just, it defies all expectations. I often say that I joke that a photographer, a photo book should have as many pictures as one's age. And, and Gilles Perez, he's getting older now. Maybe he's 70, and he's not 1,000. So I was, wow, 1,000 pictures. But it's the exception that proves the rule. It's something really profoundly special. And I hugely recommend it. It's expensive, but it's worth it. And Tim Davis's book is a delight, and the essays are, for photographers especially, just a treat. So 2 books, some words and pictures, and I've figured out how to make a video again. So thanks so much.